Hi everyone, welcome to another monthly wrap-up. We're talking about February. It's February 27th. I'm gonna put money on the fact that I'm not gonna finish the book that I'm working on until March. So I feel confident filming this even though we have 2 days left of the month. Hello, how are you? If you're watching this right when I posted it, I'm somewhere in Central Europe. Hopefully you guys follow me on Instagram and maybe you'll come to one of my meetups. Exciting stuff all around. If you want to ever see my life outside of my book identity, I have a main channel where I vlog pretty much my weekly, like, everyday life, and then hopefully whenever I'm lucky enough to travel, I always take you along. So if you are interested in seeing me this time in Prague and Vienna, check it out. So anyway, before we dive in, I actually didn't read, by my standards, I didn't read a lot this month, but I read books that had great impacts. So I felt like I was on a journey. But before we dive right in, I need to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video who makes me running this channel possible. And that is Squarespace. Squarespace is a place where you can host your online presence. I have a site hosted by Squarespace that I have used for years as a blog, but because of the many features that they have, like comment sections, membership, subscription levels, linking your social media accounts, and also monetization, you can use it for things like an online community or a shop as well. They have a really cool analytics section that I'm a big data nerd, so I really enjoy. So you can see who's looking at your site, what they're looking for, where they're coming from, etc. It's just a really great service, especially if you feel like you aren't necessarily techie. They have really great templates for your website, so you can just kind of click, 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 and have your site ready to be launched. And so if you want to see how that works, you can go to squarespace.com and set up your site fully for free. And then you can go to squarespace.com/caricanread when you are ready to launch it to the public, and you will get 10% off of your first website or domain. Thank you so much to Squarespace as always. Let's begin. We're starting with a doozy. Here we go. Okay. If you watched my January wrap-up, you saw me in the midst of a panic, wondering when I was going to get my hands on my Chain of Thorns ebook because I pre-ordered it. Got it right after I finished editing this video. It was impeccable timing. Thank you. I read Chain of Thorns. Last month, I did a reread of reading Chain of Gold and Chain of Iron. So here's the thing. I love this series. I think that this was one of her best series, with the caveat being that Chain of Thorns was inherently not a great book. I loved it in the moment because, like I said, I had been doing a reread of Chain of Gold, Chain of Iron. I was in the world. I love her characters so much. I enjoyed Chain of Thorns because I wanted to be in the world. Like, it's one of those things where I would take any kind of content from it because I just wanted to be there. And so she gave us like 800 freaking pages of it. But thinking back, she just didn't tie up the things that I wanted. She didn't. Yeah, well, we'll get into it. So the series that I'm talking about is the Last Hours series. It's by Cassandra Clare. It is part of the Shadowhunter world. This is a world that I have been in since high school. I started with the Mortal Instruments, which, if you follow my Instagram, you know that we are starting the plot summaries for the Shadowhunter world, because I feel like the Mortal Instruments is the series that everybody wants to forget exists. Like, I don't know anyone who is like, yes, Mortal Instruments is my favorite Shadowhunter series. Most people love Infernal Devices, and The Last Hours comes right after Infernal Devices chronologically. So we have some characters that we have met, that we have loved, that are in this, but they're adults, they're parents, it's great. And then we get like this whole new wonderful cast of characters as well. So this is set in London. We follow a group of Shadowhunters who are raised in a really interesting environment in that there haven't been a whole lot of demons for them to fight. That's what Shadowhunters are. So they're kind of living this lush life of, like, they don't have a whole lot of responsibilities. Like, they train. It's like being a firefighter and there's just like never any fires to put out, you know? So of course, big fire happens. Metaphorically speaking. Like I said, I absolutely loved the characters. I thought the Chain of Iron was a wonderful book. Chain of Gold was really good. Chain of Iron was... And then Chain of Thorns just kind of floundered it. What do I have to say that isn't spoilery? I think that the reason that people loved this series from the first 2 books is that she tackles some really big things. There's many different types of kind of self-destructive tendencies. We deal heavily with alcoholism, actually, in like multiple characters. I thought that it was really interesting how she was going to deal with that, and like everything that she did, there was this build up for like, wow, this is going to be really wonderful once she wraps this up, and she just kind of didn't wrap it up. The ending was very much like it was action, and then we cut to this sort of super cut of like, wow, things wrapped up, and it was like, well, I was reading the book because I wanted those details, Cassie. Why'd we get a supercut reel of that? So I just felt like, I don't know, she just didn't, she had so many pages in that book and she just kind of didn't, you know? That being said though, I love that world and I really enjoyed those characters and being along for the ride. It just felt a little off once I reflected on it. But that being said, Chain of Iron and Chain of Gold were so good. I also want to point out that it's quite funny. It takes place, so this takes place in London, as does the Infernal Devices series. And it's so interesting to me how my mind, I have the London, Institute? The London Institute in my mind, and it is the same throughout the series. Like, it's so funny that even though I'm reading like kind of a new story, the architecture of my brain, I'm back in the same place. Like, I see the same hallways, especially like the courtyard. So much happens in the London Institute, like just little courtyard outside. I see that courtyard, I see the gates like so perfectly, and it's identical to what I saw when I was reading Infernal Devices. And I just think it's so funny how, yeah, I really love that. So it was really more of a nostalgia thing where I was so happy to be back in London fighting demons, you know? A bummer that it wasn't super strong, but like it wasn't bad. It would have been incredible if she had pulled it off, and I just don't think that she pulled it off. Like, another one of my favorite series of all time is the Gilded Wolves series, and I hated how it ended. So you can still have a really good series and have a poor ending, I think, and still hold so much love for it in your heart, and that's kind of where I'm at with Chain of Thorns. Did I enjoy reading it? Yes. Did I do everything in my power to slow down my reading? Yes. I actually read it like over a couple days, and I would like intentionally put it down and like go for a walk. Try to stall because I wasn't ready for it to end, but it has. So now I'm summarizing the Mortal Instruments for you. So anyway, that was Chain of Thorns. Thank you, Cassie Clare, for another wild ride. Next up, I was working on a video that is already up. It is about cozy, feel-good fantasy reads. And so because of that, I read a book called Witchful Thinking. This is a fantasy romance, emphasis on the romance. It definitely just felt like I was reading a rom-com where there were just witches and mermaids, but it takes place on the Jersey Shore. We follow our main girl, who is a witch, and she feels a lot of responsibility to her family to kind of keep the traditions going, and so she puts all of her dreams on the back burner. She's one of those people who graduated high school, stayed in her hometown, and sees all of these other people she went to school with doing these great things and feeling really kind of inferior. So we're following her as she preps for another high school reunion, and her kind of ex best friend, coulda woulda shoulda been boyfriend, comes back into town, and he is a merman who like travels the world, has these insane adventures, is like super big on Instagram or something, and his parents, in an effort to kind of get him to just come home and stay home, bought him a house. The house being our witch's dream house. It's all, you know, it's a rom-com, everything is connected. So we have this kind of summer break where maybe some sparks, there's like a rekindling, I don't know. I thought that it was quite funny. I just loved the backdrop of the Jersey Shore because I could picture it so well. So I thought it was cute. I loved the setting, but probably about halfway through I really lost interest. I said this in my other video, but the way that they spoke within themselves, because we had dual POVs, was so drastically different from how they spoke out loud. So when there were like flirtatious moments, I almost felt like they were completely different people. I don't know. It just was really hard to connect to the characters because they kept, I felt like switching. It was almost like there were 4 characters their internal selves and then their external selves. But I still would recommend that you give it a try. There's a lot of talk about interior design. Yeah, I would still give it a try if like those things seem to appeal to you, but it just kind of wasn't. It was kind of a miss for me. But that was witchful thinking. After that, I read a book that feels like a fever dream, and it is called A Master of Djinn. This was so cool, and I know that I read it out of order, so if you love this author, I apologize. This is a novel that follows 3 or like 3.5 novella that kind of set you up for this full-length novel. Personally, I think you can dive right into the novel because that's what I did. I could tell reading it that there were some like maybe inside jokes or references to the novellas, but overall as far as like getting to know the characters and getting to know the world, I wasn't confused. So you can do that. But the novellas are like 30 pages according to when I looked them up on like Goodreads or something. So you could, I don't know why I haven't just read them, but anyway, A Master of Djinn takes place in Egypt in like the 1920s, maybe right before World War I actually. And what has essentially happened is Egypt just continued to advance. England did come in and do their whole like colonization shtick that they did everywhere, but for some reason Egypt kind of pushed them out and prevailed. I forget exactly what happened, but we're kind of in that context of like kind of height of the British Empire, but Egypt somehow was able to maintain its sort of separate identity and really advance. My notes say high fantasy, great female characters, and then I put world was better than the plot. And I feel like I don't remember the plot, so we follow our main girl, who I believe is like a detective in some way, shape, or form. She likes to work alone, and she ends up getting a new, really excited partner because there aren't many women in the force, and so she gets this female partner who is like, yeah, it's gonna be girl power. And our main character is like, dear God, I am a lone wolf. Leave me alone. So there's that dynamic. We also have our main character has a girlfriend, like a secret girlfriend who's a spy. There's so many great characters. It's a lot of mythology kind of tying to Egyptian mythology, so there's a lot of references to Egyptian gods. There's a lot of cults that venerate one particular god, and there's kind of like infighting there, but then there's this and this and this. So interesting. The book starts off with a bunch of old white men, Egyptophilia, the kind of old British colonists who became obsessed with Egypt. They kind of start their own like secret society or cult or whatever, and then they all get murdered, potentially by the god that they were venerating. So we investigate that murder, and it takes us through like all of these different cults and stuff like that. So like I said, I think I liked the world more than I liked the plot, but I loved the characters so much. I just can't explain it. I just really liked it. I really liked it. So I would highly recommend, if you haven't read it yet and you're into high fantasy, definitely like a complicated magic system, or I guess, you know, cult system to carry in your mind as you're reading it, but I thought that it was really good. So that is A Master of Djinn, and again, they have a bunch of novellas that you can also read as well. Oh my goodness. Okay, after that, I completely forgot that I read this book. February is so short, but it feels so long. I read Hell Followed With Us. I saw that my friend Sydney had read it, and so without knowing anything about it, I put it on hold. First of all, the beginning of the book, I really appreciated that the author's note was in the beginning, and the author's note was like, hey, this has really triggering stuff in it. I saw recently that there was some kind of discourse about trigger warnings and like how it's actually bad. It's like making us oversensitized. We need to be faced with things that hurt, whatever. It was like a Twitter argument, so like do with that what you will. But I think that these were really, really important, especially because this was specifically dealing with a lot of like body dysmorphia. It talked about transitioning, being trans, but it also was body horror. So it was just, I mean, I really appreciated that author's note, and if you're gonna dive into it, like, read that first before you decide if you want to get it or not, because I haven't read a truly horror book in a while, and this was like gritty and gruesome, and you need to be like prepped when you go in. Hell Followed With Us takes place in this kind of post-apocalyptic society where some religious group had released some kind of virus to the world, and it was sort of like their flood, right? Getting rid of the non-believers, whatever. So our main character is a member of this cult, and so they are safe from the virus outside, but you learn about it throughout the book, but they have kind of been made into this monster essentially. So our main character has been infected with the virus, but the virus isn't killing them, it's turning them into something else, which will eventually kill them, their soul, but their body will become like an evil angel thing. Okay? We meet them as they are trying to escape. Through this escape, we meet this kind of outlier group that has somehow survived, and they are trying to take down the cult. That outlier group was formed from just a bunch of kids who were at the, like, I think it was like an LGBTQ plus youth center. So it's just a bunch of kids trying to take down this cult that's trying and pretty much succeeded to make everyone go extinct. It's intense, again, with the body horror. Like, our main character is basically like a ticking time bomb, and so every couple of pages you will get an update on their body, and it will be like, oh, I like had an itchy nose, and like my nose skin came off on my fingers. Like, it's very descriptive. A lot of blood and guts, and I would recommend it though. It was something unlike anything I've ever read before. Again, I'm not really into the horror genre that much. It was just so interesting, the kind of everything that was discussed in there, whether it was religion or identity, trauma, good and evil, faith, stuff like that. Really interesting stuff, but real gruesome. So go into that knowing. Hell Followed With Us obviously did not make it to any kind of cozy reading list that I was working on this month. I think that's maybe why it was extra jarring, is because I was like reading all these like fluffy nice things, and then it was like, their ribs came out of their body. So that's Hell Followed With Us. Alrighty, after that though, I did go back into cozy and I read Tress of the Emerald Sea. This is a part of the kind of secret projects that Brandon Sanderson has been working on. He did a crowdfunding event which raised an insane amount of money, like $22 million. And so he is publishing 4 books that he has worked on that are standalone, but they connect into a universe that he has already built up. So I have only read Mistborn from Brandon Sanderson. I really loved it. I thought the magic system was so cool. Tress of the Emerald Sea is technically in that world, but you do not need any background to go into this. If you want this to be your first Brandon Sanderson, I would highly recommend it. I thought it was so funny. It's about a girl who lives on an island that people are not supposed to leave. The magic system of the world is like, there are these spores floating around in the air, and if it touches water it explodes into like something. So the spores that are around her turn into vines and trees and stuff. So if you accidentally like breathe it in and it touches your saliva, you'll get like a tree growing in your body and you will die, right? There are other ones that if water touches it, it becomes like crystals and, you know, stuff like that. So she's not supposed to leave her island, and she doesn't really want to until the boy that she is in love with is forced to leave. His family takes him along, and we quickly find out that he needs to be rescued, and who better to do it than our girl Tress. It's a cute, adorable little pirate story. Our narrator is hilarious and is like technically a character in the book, but he's pretty much removed So he's able to make such funny commentary. It's just a hilarious book. I had a really fun time with it. Crazy enough, Brandon Sanderson watched my cozy fantasy video and commented on it, and has watched my A Court of Silver Flames wrap up, which is terrifying to know. So he's also a booktube junkie. He said so himself. So go support a fellow booktube lover. I thought it was really, really great. Again, if you've never read his work and you want to, it was just a really fun time. Really cool magic system. Cozy feel-good fantasy. After that, I read A Psalm for the Wild Built. This is on Kindle Unlimited. I was about to wait weeks and weeks and weeks at my library for it. It's on Kindle Unlimited, just so you know, so I didn't have to wait. Anyway, this is a very, very short story about a world that we created technology, AI, our robots, whatever. They became so intelligent. I forget exactly what happened, but they became so intelligent that we were sort of like, we feel bad making you do all of this work. We would like our world back, sans AI. And the human offered basically, you can be normal citizens, you can live in our world, whatever. And the robots were sort of like, we never asked to be a part of your world. We would just like to go out and discover what it's like to just be us on our terms. So all of the robots go into the woods and are never heard from again. And so we follow a monk, I suppose, who has decided that they just aren't into what they're doing, and they kind of want to get closer to nature. They want to hear crickets is their thing. They want to hear the crickets. So they decide to become a wandering tea monk, which you basically just come get a cup of tea from them and they will listen to your worries and say everything's gonna be okay. And that's their work. So they're traveling all around and they get further and further and further into nature, where we eventually meet a robot. And the rest of the book is really just them talking about things and life and philosophy. I think I went into it with too high expectations. A lot of people I know and trust were like, this was amazing, and it just didn't do anything for me. I think I'm just also, this is kind of a reason why I can't read self-help books, is I find that it's really easy to sound corny when you're talking about certain like philosophical questions. They just get cheesy really fast, and I felt like this book went a little bit towards the cheese. It didn't really say anything profound that I hadn't heard of before, so it just kind of, I don't know. I just didn't really like it, and I wished that I did. I wanted so badly to like it. I liked it until we met the robot, weirdly. Like, I loved the leaving the city and becoming a tea monk and all of this stuff. I love that. I think if you want something similar to that, I felt like Project Hail Mary did a really good job, because I don't think Andy Weir was trying to ask, like, he wasn't straight up asking philosophical questions. It just kind of, those thoughts kind of occurred to you as you were reading them, instead of the characters straight up like to each other being like, well, why do you blah blah blah. I don't know how to explain it, but like, I went into it thinking that this was going to be a fave of the month, and I didn't enjoy it. Hot take time. So that is A Psalm for the Wild Built. I feel really bad, but like, let me know what you thought, because I've only heard fantastic things about it. Maybe I missed the mark. Those are my thoughts. After that, I read This Poison Heart, which is, I believe it's an unfinished series. I've only read the first one. The second one is out. I think there's going to be a third. Warning you. This is a fantasy. I believe it's technically young adult. It is a fantasy that involves our main girl who can do plant magic. She doesn't have a whole lot of control over it, but basically plants love her. If she's walking down the street, trees will lean towards her. She can make things grow, which is really great because she lives in Brooklyn with her moms and they own a flower shop. So when they're like low on roses, she can like go out back and be like, whew, roses. Okay. Our main girl is also adopted. She knows that she's adopted. So it's a surprise, but not a huge surprise, when one day a lawyer comes in and is like, hi, your birth aunt, so her birth mother's sister, has passed away and is leaving you a house and a fortune up in upstate New York. There you go. Bye. basically. The moms are like, listen, money's tight. A big house would be nice. Let's go check it out. And once we're up there, we discover a lot of different mysteries regarding the house, which has big ol' secret garden vibes, I must say. The tiny town in upstate New York has a bunch of secrets too. Paul Rudd may or may not live there. He is referenced. There's a cast of characters that are introduced. There are creepy people that just show up on their front lawn in the middle of the night staring up at the house. It's so wholesome and cute. Like, the family especially is so sweet, but then there's just these moments where there are jump scares and it's creepy. There's a lot of talk of like apothecary vibes meets a flower shop, meets secret garden, meets a teensy bit of the inheritance games, but not really, just because she inherited something. I really liked it. And the thing that it's such a huge part of the plot, and I don't know why I keep forgetting to reference it. It also is really strongly tied to Greek mythology. That comes like a little bit later in the book, but I think the second book is going to heavily rely on Greek mythology. So if you're into that, you have to read this book. Really cool. Like, it just had so many interesting things all tied into one. So if you haven't read that yet, I do highly recommend This Poison Heart. The sequel is This Wild, well, I'll put it here. But I will definitely be continuing it. I just didn't quite have time this month, but highly recommend. Continuing on with fantasy, specifically cozy vibes, I read The Grace of Wild Things. So last month I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies and loved it. But that author announced that she, like a week after she published Emily Wilde, she's like, oh, by the way, I have another book coming out. This is definitely more middle grade, but I did still enjoy it. The way that she pitched it is exactly what it is, so I'm just gonna say it like that. It is Anne of Green Gables, Anne with an E, if she was a witch. That's exactly what it is. Takes place on Prince Edward Island. She is this really like precocious, energetic, charismatic, just like so excited about life and can't shut up character that is 100% Anne with an E. She escapes from her orphanage and finds this witch that she had heard legends about who lives in the forest and is like, hi there, I'm also a witch, can you teach me? And the witch is super grumpy, tries to eat her, and is just like, I want nothing to do with you, you very annoying child. But as Anne does, Grace also just really grows on people. And so we just follow her on this adventure of living with this witch, trying to learn all of these spells, befriending a little fairy boy. It's just very, very Anne with an E, but magic. Because it was very much middle grade, it got a little boring for me, but I think if you are looking for a middle grade book that ticks all of those boxes, excellent. Really enjoyed it. I really like her writing. I'm obviously excited for the sequel to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia, but just in general, very excited for anything that she writes. So that is The Grace of Wild Things. Okay, and after that, I finally got this book on hold. I have been waiting for this at the library for so long, and it was not what I expected. I read If You Could See the Sun. Based on the title, based on the cover, knowing nothing about it, I thought it was going to be like lit fic, is what I was expecting, and instead it's like young adult magical realism, like a good Gossip Girl. It's about a girl named Sun. This is coming back to me in like blips. It feels like a dream. We follow a girl who is living in Beijing, and she goes to this incredibly expensive private school, like international school, where most of her fellow students are the children of massive celebrities or the children of people who own these multi-billion-dollar companies. I mean, these kids are the top of the top. She is on a scholarship, and the book starts off with her parents being like, hey, let's try and pick another school because we can't afford it anymore, even with the scholarship. And they basically tell her, listen, just finish out this semester and use this semester to figure out what school you want to go to, because you're not going to this school anymore. And our main girl is obsessed with being number one academically, and she can't be number one academically if she's not at the number one school. She's very obsessed with this. So instead of researching what other schools she could go to, she figures out ways to make a shit ton of money. And lucky for her, she randomly discovers that she can turn invisible. This is where the magical realism comes in. And so without going into it too much, she uses that power to help her find a way to continue school. There is academic rivals to lovers. I really liked it. It was not at all what I expected, but it was just really easy to read. I really enjoyed the characters. And yeah, I went into it thinking it was going to be something totally different, but the story that I read, I really enjoyed. I would recommend If You Could See the Sun. Now that I know what it's about, I highly recommend. After that, I'm not going to talk about it too much because I made an entire reading vlog about it, which I posted last week, and I read the first 3 books of the Plated Prisoner series, starting with Gild. I did this as part of my kind of reading experiments of reading series that are very popular that people aren't sure they really want to read, so I read them with you, for you. I went into it thinking I was really not gonna like it, and I ended up thinking it wasn't that bad. I thought that it was just, it needed a lot of editing in terms of like speeding up the plot. I thought that the first 2 books totally should have been 1 book and much shorter. And then I thought that the second half of the 3rd book was really good, and it almost made me want to keep reading the series, which I just didn't have time for. I was very surprised by it. It is a play off of the myth of King Midas, which is the king where everything he touches turns to gold. It's definitely adult, dark fantasy. The irony of this series is that this book comes with a content warning that is like very serious. It's not even serious, it's just like very to the point. This is what is in here, be aware, because it does contain a lot of violence as well as non-consensual sex scenes. The irony is I felt like Gild actually didn't, that content warning made me think it was going to be so much worse than it was, and I felt like smut level wise it actually wasn't that bad. Like there was much more plot and things going on versus how much smut there was. But then we have Zodiac Academy, which is like 99% sexual assault, and the content warning that those authors wrote is like, LOL, bully trope, imagine if Voldemort ran Hogwarts. And like, it's so pervasive. So I'm just like, I'm still just like so mad about Zodiac Academy. But anyway, so Plated Prisoner, I mean, if you like smut, there you go. You can just check my video if you want to see what it's about, but that was Gild. After that, a book that I didn't completely finish, but I read most of, and this is on Kindle Unlimited as well. It was The Bookshop and the Barbarian. It was 100% a cozy fantasy read. It literally calls itself a cozy fantasy novel. It references Legends and Lattes. It's supposed to take place in the same world. Like there's a conversation that happens when someone's like, yeah, over in like a couple towns over, this lady opened a coffee shop. What's it called? Like Champions and Coffee or something. So it's very funny. I thought that it was just written in a really witty way. It went a little overboard. Like I think the author could have taken out like a couple of jokes that the narrator makes, because I was kind of like, okay, we get it. But it's very much like the narrator is talking directly to you. It made me laugh out loud. It was quite funny. So it's just about basically Legends and Lattes. Like it's this girl who shows up in a new town and buys a bookshop, and it follows her trying to set up this bookshop, and there are goblins and an evil landlord. I mean, if you're just looking for something to pass the time, I didn't finish it, but from what I read, The Bookshop and the Barbarian was a jolly good time. And now I need to like collect myself to talk about this. I read the last 2 books, the last thing we're going to talk about today. I read Harrow the 9th and Nona the 9th. I have put these off for so long. So I read Gideon last September, maybe, I think, and it changed my life. I was dying. I thought it was so funny. It is so good. It was on my list of best books for 2022. Loved it. I would put my life on the line for Griddle. Harrow the Ninth and Nona the Ninth are the second and third books in the series. There allegedly will be 4. It was planned to be a trilogy, and then according to the acknowledgements at the end of Nona, the author was like, yeah, so I started writing what I thought was going to be the last book, and we hadn't even gotten to like the main bit of the plot, and I already had 140,000 words, so we decided to make it 4 books. I'm so glad she did, because I know this 4th book is going to rip my soul from my body. Is that a spoiler? I don't know. Anyway, it's gonna break me into itty bitty pieces, and I can't wait. So Gideon the Ninth, for those of you who don't know, how do I describe it? We live in this like post-Earth society where God has created this new system where there are 9 planets. Each planet has a different kind of power. It's all related to necromancy, and one day all of the kind of royalty from each planet is invited to come to the main planet and do this thing. It's very vague, like they're supposed to compete or they're supposed to like learn something, whatever. Come here, and hopefully if you guys succeed, you will become something called a lictor. Haven't said any of these words out loud before. But it's basically like this, you are going to ascend to be this immortal, wonderful thing that is like the hand of God. Like you're gonna be, you know, God's personal soldier kind of thing. And so obviously everybody wants to be that, so off they trot. We follow members of the 9th house, the 9th planet, which is the furthest out. It houses the tomb, which is like the most important thing in this solar system. I'm not explaining this well at all. Here's the thing. The world building doesn't matter for me. It's 100% about the characters. We have Gideon, who is this girl who is basically like an indentured servant. We don't really know how she got on the planet. She seems to be like the only other kid on the planet. She hates it. She is trying to escape constantly. Hilarious. My favorite written character ever. We also have Harrow, who is the kind of princess, if you will, the reverend daughter of the 9th house. Harrow stops one of Gideon's many escape plans and is like, Gideon, sit down, listen to me. I want to go do this thing, be a part of this competition, whatever, but I can't go unless I have a cavalier. My battery's gonna die. Hold on. She can't go unless she has a cavalier, which is basically like a guard, a soldier, somebody who's going to, if they are challenged to a duel, that person is going to take Harrow's place and battle for her, right? Harrow was like, Gideon, you're literally my only choice. I hate everything about you, but like, come with me, and if you do this, then I'll set you free and you can like go do whatever. So Gideon agrees and off they go. Shit goes down in Gideon the Ninth. I love this book. I can't guys, I love this book. Harrow the Ninth follows everything that happens in Gideon, and luckily people told me that my mind was gonna melt and it's not gonna make sense. I read about 25% of it back in October, like right after I read Gideon, and I was just like, my mind is not ready. I'm not prepared for this. So I put it down, and then this month I was like, I gotta know. I gotta read it. So I pushed through. It is true. The things they say. Word on the street. Harrow the Ninth makes jack shit sense. People are like, oh, wait till you get to the 70% mark. Technically, yes, you find something out later that like kind of makes the book make sense, but not really. Like just because you know vaguely what like a piece of the puzzle, it doesn't make the puzzle make any sense at all. I will say, like, I read it, I sat with it for a second, I went to Wikipedia, and the synopsis on Wikipedia did a really good job. So if you're like really confused, honestly, the Wikipedia synopsis did a pretty good job, but it still had that like incredible wit that Gideon had. It's not quite as funny, but it just had these hilarious bits. And I'm gonna insert Joel. Fictional Fates did an incredible video on all 3 of these books, so you should totally go watch them, but I just need you all to hear Joel say something right here.
But getting into it, God has a threesome, and I was just like,
yeah, it's the details, it's just so funny. And then Nona is like reading a totally different book. It's like Gideon, Harrow, and Nona are so different. Literally, like, just the reading experience, the voice. I can't believe they're all written by the same author. Nona is so endearing, and you really get more background on like the creation of this universe. I also loved that it was through Nona's eyes, and Nona is this kind of childlike character. You know, when you read a book where the narrator is a child and they often like name things really funny, like all the characters have these really funny nicknames, and it just felt, I don't know, it just made me feel so good reading it, even though it was really complicated and also really sad. But again, I kind of had Wikipedia open, and once I read a big chunk, I would go back and I would just make sure that I was like, was I comprehending it? And that made the reading experience a lot easier. So just know that, like, no, you aren't really, especially with Harrow, you are not supposed to know what's going on. That's the point. So it was difficult to push through, even as someone who loved the book so much. So I feel like the reading experience, especially of Harrow, the reading experience wasn't fun, but I'm just so insanely interested in the world and what is going to happen and what's going on. And I think that Alecto, knowing what I know now from the end of Nona, is gonna be hopefully yeah, I'm gonna say it now. It's gonna be my favorite book in the series. I cannot wait. It doesn't have a release date, but it should come out this year. Okay, so I was just kind of like struggle city at the end of this month, like pushing through those books. But I'm so glad that I made it through, and it's so interesting. I would definitely say that Harrow was difficult. Nona was difficult, but like great to read. There's just so many characters and so many names and so many, like, I don't want to spoil anything, but just like, it's difficult to keep the whole cast straight in my mind, but I think it's going to be worth it, and I can't wait. So that is the Locked Tomb series. It makes me want to reread Gideon, honestly, is what I want to do. But anyway, so that was my February. I'm also starting to read The Rabbit Hutch, but I haven't finished it, so I don't want to give too much. But that's my first thing on my March TBR. I'm also going to be on an airplane for a lot of the month. I have like 2 really long flights, so I will be reading a lot of romance, and I'm really excited because that's what I read on airplanes. I had a good reading month. It was stressful, it was difficult, I went through a lot of emotions, but I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I will catch you guys next time. Once I get back from Prague and Vienna, I will start working on my Mortal Instruments thing, but I have a ton of travel this spring, so it might be like a summer project for me, but I promise more plot summaries are coming for you. And once again, thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this. You can see in the description box, go to squarespace.com/caricanread, and you can get 10% off of your first website or domain. Thank you so much, Squarespace. I'm gonna leave you guys here because I need to eat and edit, and I'm also doing a little Q&A. Thank you for your questions. I may or may not have made a big purchase that I'm really excited to tell you guys about, but I'm going to save that for another video. So I'll see you then, and I love you all very, very much. Let me know what you're reading. Let me know what I should be reading. And love always. Okay? Bye!